Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Edick, President of the San Diego World Affairs Council. Welcome to today's presentation. Today, we'll hear from current member of the Parliament of Lebanon, Najat Aoun Saliba, and she will discuss Lebanon, restoring a broken state to end occupation and destruction. Following Najat's presentation, there will be ample time for Q&A. Just a quick note, the next presentation of the San Diego World Affairs Council will be a hybrid program, both in person and live stream in collaboration with our North County chapter. David will present on Russia's wartime economy. Now to today's program. Lebanon faces a turning point amid regional shifts, internal exploitation, and external pressures. Geopolitical and demographic changes are altering power balances, while warlords have plundered resources, weakened institutions. Iranian proxies, once dominant, are now weakened, but Hezbollah fuels instability to maintain influence. Meanwhile, Israeli occupation persists, further straining sovereignty. Despite these challenges, Lebanon has a chance to rebuild. With the election of a president and a cabinet of experts, the country can restore credibility, regain international trust, and enact reforms. Strengthening governance and curbing interference can lead Lebanon towards sovereignty, stability, and renewal. Now, briefly about today's speaker. Najat Aoun Saliba is a member of the Lebanese parliament elected in 2002. She's a professor of analytical chemistry and an atmospheric chemist at the American University, Beirut. She was the director of AUB's Nature Conservation Center from 2013 to 2020. She is co-founder and director of Hadith Beirut, an initiative launched after Beirut's tragic 2020 fertilizer explosion in the port, which many of you are familiar with. She's also the founder and director of the Environment Academy, an initiative created with the support of the World Health Organization. She was appointed a laureate of the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science program in 2019. Born in 1966, she studied at the Lebanese University, where she earned her bachelor's degree in 1986. She moved to the United States for her graduate studies and earned her master's degree at Cal State Long Beach in 1994. She completed her doctoral studies at the University of Southern California in 1999. She completed a thesis on water pollution and studied catalysis. She was a postdoc researcher at the University of California, Irvine. Saliba joined the American University of Beirut in 2001. She helped establish the IBSAR Nature Conservation Center for Sustainable Futures in 2002, which looked to protect Lebanon's biodiversity. She used to be director of IBSAR, which has since been renamed the Nature Conservation Center at the American University in Beirut. Saliba established the Atmospheric and Analytical Laboratory and became involved politically in Lebanon after the 2020 Beirut port explosion. She ran in the 2022 Lebanese general election as a new face against the 50-year ruling political class. She won a seat in the parliament representing the Maronite sect of the Chuf district. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Najat Aoun Saliba.
Thank you for the introduction, and I am really honored to be with you this morning. I understand that you have a busy time, but you also made the effort and carved a time to be with us today. Thank you, David, for this great opportunity to be with the World Affairs Council this morning. I will share a presentation on the current status, or the status pre and post recent war, and then we can open it up for discussion later. All right. I want to start by thanking my collaborators and colleagues, Mr. Rashad Rafi' and Shukri Haddad, both of whom are part of the Socioeconomic Institute for Development. And we are together working on issues related to Lebanon and the region, researching and making sense out of it and looking for local governance and putting it in the global context as well. Today, I would like to talk about the situation in Lebanon and how Lebanon has been trapped in a global conflict for probably 18 years after after it was now freed from this grip of Iranian proxies, and we'll go into the details in a moment. So the agenda of my talk today will be divided into three main topics: the global and regional conflicts and how these are intertwined with the local Lebanese politics, and then how Lebanon has made political strategies and paid the price of some political choices. And then I will end with a glimpse of hope with the new opportunities that are opening up only a few months ago after the election of the Lebanese president and the formation of the new ministerial cabinet. So in the global conflict, I will be talking about the world at war and also how the Middle East is also at war and what is the link between them. If we look at the current status of the globe, we can see that over 2 billion people are living in a zone of conflict or in a place of conflict. This conflict or these zones of conflicts are not all equal. Some of them are low risk, but some are extreme high risk. And we can see that in the Middle East, we have Sudan, Lebanon, Palestine that are really living in a very, very high risk or the highest risk possible in the scale that has been assigned by the conflict index. So in a nutshell, we can say that 1 in 7 people are living in a conflict area. And then we can also, we can say that 50 countries, sorry. Okay, 1 in 7 people are living in a conflict area. 50 countries are mostly living in a high-risk area. Palestine, Syria, Myanmar, Mexico, also Lebanon and Sudan, Nigeria and Syria are basically among the highest or the highest index level. And then 15% increase has been witnessed in the past 24 months. Usually, I was listening to Condoleezza Rice giving a podcast, and one sentence really struck my attention, and that is, she said that great powers do not mind their own business; they really mind other people's business. And if we can think about what's happening in the world today, we can see that there are two big powers that are trying to take or put their hands on a lot of places in the world, and we can see it manifesting in a very, very bold way with President Trump claiming territories that are outside the borders of the United States. Maybe China has not had the courage to say it out loud like President Trump did, but definitely they're both competing over taking more and more resources from the world. Usually, when those interferences happen, they don't happen in a straight line, like one person claiming or asking for something from the other country. They happen in a multi-layered, many factors going, interplaying together in order for these resources to be confiscated by superpower. One of the areas where resources are very, abundant and where there is a huge conflict over them or over what's happening in those countries is the Middle East. So that's why I'm going to go from the word at war into the Middle East and focus on the Middle East a little bit. There are two definitions or two definitions of how many countries are involved in the Middle East. Some people restricted to the Gulf area, plus Iraq, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey, Lebanon, and Palestine, and Israel. Some others just make it a much larger area to include Sudan, Egypt, Libya, and Iran. So basically, if we include all of the areas that are highlighted in off-white color, we can see that there is a large area of different countries here that do not align together in politics or they are in conflict with each other. What's happening in this area? For the longest time, or throughout history, there was what was called the Silk Road that has been reinitiated by China. And this Silk Road, if you can see with my cursor, it starts in China, but it goes through Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and then Istanbul all the way to Europe. So this is one road. The second road also starts off with China and it goes through the maritime channels in order for it to go through the Yemen canal here, and then it goes all the way to Europe. So China, for the longest time, wanted to reinitiate and reactivate this war, this road. And then there was recently a new road that has been drawn, and this is called India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC, that initiates or starts in India. It goes through the Gulf countries, especially the United Emirates, Saudi Arabia. It goes through Iraq, through Iraq and Syria a little bit, but then through Israel, the Haifa port, and then moves all the way to Europe in order to promote and to transfer goods. This corridor, Saudi Arabia has put a lot of hopes and opportunities on these corridors, saying that they will help in promoting technological advancement, engineering, and AI and all of that, in addition to the gas lines and petroleum lines and the economic trades. So there has been a lot of talks about this corridor and a lot of build-up in order for this corridor to take place and start materializing. So if we look at this corridor, we can see that UAE, the United Arab Emirates, started this trade and using this corridor, and we can see that the trade with Israel has increased tremendously in the past only 4 years, and it has gone from less than 1 billion or 10% of a billion all the way to 3.3 billion US dollars, despite the war that has been going between Israel and Gaza and Israel and Lebanon. At the same time, we can see that there is another line here also under the IMEC corridor that is going through this passage over here and through Egypt all the way to Europe. And we can see that this trade route to Europe from India via the Middle East has also incurred to Egypt a lot of goods. I mean, a lot of $1 million of exchange and trade between Israel and Egypt per year, in 1 year. So this is to say that these trade routes are really beneficial to all the countries that are collaborating together and wanting to open up the trade in this area. So this has intrigued Iran a lot, and Iran felt that they were completely out of this new development, and that's why uh, Iran started here to strengthen allies in the countries that are in proximity to this corridor and in proximity to those trade routes. And it started to send money, support, and even training, military training to create those proxies in Iraq, in Syria, in Gaza, of course, in Lebanon, and we're going to talk about that in plenty of time. And if we can see here, down here, there is also the Yemen, because the Yemen, if you can see from the map, it's very, very important for the trade route that was going all the way by the sea all the way to Europe. So these proxies were basically financed by Iran, and they were playing the role of stopping this IMEC corridor and strengthening a new game by saying, by Iran saying, you cannot do this outside, or by leaving us out. And so Turkey also came in and said, okay, I need to be a major player in here. And that's why we saw that Turkey has infiltrated through Syria to take over some areas, or to have a huge influence over some areas in the Middle East. So yes, I know that I'm relating this to an economic growth or economic trade only. And like I said at the beginning, that it's never a one factor. There are multi-factors that usually come into play. But this is one of an important factor that we need to take in consideration. So because Iran was feeling left out, that's why they started all these wars in order to stop all these normalizations through the Abraham Accord or through the IMEC, or all of this growth in time and effort. And so we all know what happened in Gaza. There was a major destruction. Hamas was completely financed by Iran, and they actually started a war that they could not continue, and this has caused major destruction to Gaza. The same thing, Hezbollah was a major Iranian proxy that also has initiated a war under the pretext of supporting Gaza, but this also has turned out to be a disaster for Lebanon and for the Lebanese people and the Palestinian people as well. For the Lebanese people, we saw that there was a really a very major imbalance in the power. Israel, backed up by the United States and using well-advanced AI and other weaponries, has done 11,238 strikes between October 7 and October 18, 2024. They also, whereas Hezbollah did 2,370 attacks on Israel, the number of deaths for the Lebanese people was 2,318, whereas for the Israeli 41. And I'm not here at all, counting the number of deaths in Gaza and the destruction in Gaza. I think we all know the numbers there. That they are devastating. Definitely, we can see that the invasion of Israel to Lebanon has caused major destruction in most of the southern villages, and the most destruction was seen in the borders, and basically they turned all of the infrastructure and everything, all the buildings, houses, sewage network, cables, everything, they turned it into a rubble. Like a mountain of rubble. But what was also most devastating is that a lot of ruins that were historically there for thousands and thousands of years were also destroyed, bombed, and completely demolished. What happened during the war is that we had around this figure was probably before it was not updated. At the end of, before the ceasefire, we had around 1.5 million people displaced. And then those people that are shown here in red spots in the south fled mostly to mountain Lebanon. Very few fled to northern Lebanon. We also had major displacement within Beirut. In the southern border of or suburb of Beirut, we had mostly people who were affiliated in a way or another to Hezbollah. They were forced to leave their area and move also towards the north of Beirut. In all, we had major devastation, and most people who lived in the area all the way to this line almost actually left their homes and moved to other areas. At the same time, we also saw that a lot of people from the Bekaa and from Baalbek were hit hard, and some of them just were forced to leave their homes. One of the most important ruins, Roman ruins that was in Baalbek, was miraculously saved from destruction. The aftermath of the Hezbollah Israeli war actually left 500 public schools that were destroyed. 1.5 million children were forced to leave. We have environmental disasters, definitely. We have lots of debris, tons. It's estimated that the amount of debris range between 50 to 100 million cubic meters. Definitely this has, the consequences of creating lots of municipal waste. And this is a problem for managing all of this waste. Lots of forests and farmlands that were completely turned into ashes. And we have crop losses, and we have unemployment and all the economic consequences of a war. And for the social consequences, we felt that we had a complete, squeeze of the whole southern population into new areas, and this fortunately did not create tension, although a lot of people were afraid that this crowdness might create tension between people. In fact, people were very hospitable, sorry, and they actually welcomed their neighboring residents and really made sure that they have shelters and they would sit comfortably in their shelters and in their new places. For the health consequences, we also had lots of hospitals that were completely destroyed, but we had a very good disaster risk management in place that was able to accommodate all the displaced people and all the injured people in the other hospitals that they were moved to. And I think this is something that we ought to give a good credit for the Ministry of Health and its preparedness for such disasters. And for cultural, like I said, there were a lot of cultural and historical sites that were destroyed, and some of them were saved by sending to UNESCO a letter pleading for UNESCO to do a like international pressure on the parties that are parties that are members of UNESCO, and they actually responded by holding an exceptional meeting and calling on the international community to help in safeguarding those cultural sites. And it was so interesting because those cultural sites belong to humanity. They don't belong to Israel or belong to Lebanon, because they are much older than any of us living here. So why did we get to all of this disaster and complete destruction? And how did we let Iran and other countries infiltrate to our country? So, like I said, there was a huge influence from Iran to really strengthen the Shiite community. So they came in with the ideology of, or the pretext of, safeguarding and protecting the Shiite community. And that's why they created this party of Hezbollah. And soon after, they started financing them and also providing them with ammunitions and money to build their own weaponry in-house. And you can see that Hezbollah, even though it started with few villages in the south, over the years, it has spread really wide in the Bekaa Valley here in this in the area where it borders with Syria. Definitely, this is Syria over here, and in this area where it is, or it has become mostly resident of Shiite and few Sunnis and Christian living in this area. So it spread wide, definitely. Now one can ask, where is the Lebanese government? So under the Syrian guardianship, the Syrians had a lot of influence of who becomes the president and who becomes the prime minister in the country. And at the same time, they were part of this Iranian proxy, and the Iranian proxies actually protected each other. So there was a revolution in Syria trying to really topple the regime of Bashar al-Assad, but they couldn't, because Hezbollah and Syria really collaborated and coalesced together in order for them to really shut down the revolution. And Bashar al-Assad survived after 2010. And a lot of Syrians were actually forced to leave their country because they were not welcomed anymore in their country, since they were of supporters of the revolution. And so we can see here that Syria had influence on the politics in Lebanon, but also they had a great ally, and that is Hezbollah. And they really opened those borders over here and started collaborating without any control over the borders, and the weaponries and the parallel economy, the black economy, started thriving under the protection of Syria and the growth of Hezbollah, all of them chaperoned by or financed by Iran and the army of Iran. And so we can see that not only Hezbollah started to gain territories and promoting the ideology of the Shiites inside Lebanon, but they also started to take a grip on the government, meaning that they won seats in the parliament. They also were part of the cabinet, of the ministerial cabinet, and their political party became really a very strong political and armed party in the government. At the same time, what happened to the other political parties, they did not really stand against Hezbollah. They actually decided to play the same game, and they decided to turn a blind eye on the weaponry and the armament of Hezbollah, while they were ruling the other side and also benefiting from the resources and stealing basically the people's resources in order for them to remain in power and remain playing this game with Hezbollah. Let me explain what they did exactly and how they continued to strive while Hezbollah was gaining more ground and gaining more and growing in armed forces and in its presence in the area. So our system is a democratic system. It is formed from a parliament, ministerial cabinet, and a judiciary system. And all of these three entities should be completely separated from each other so that the separation of the legislative body is basically completely separated from the executive body formed by the ministries, the prime minister and the president, and all of these should be completely separated from the judiciary system in order for this body to hold anyone accountable in case there is something that is basically happening against the sovereignty and the security of the country. However, what they did in order for them to allow Hezbollah to strive and do what it does in terms of gaining more arms and also strengthening or deepening the black economy, they decided to all of these political parties that formed the parliament to actually put their members also in the ministerial cabinet and form a mini parliament. So this parliament, although its main job is to do the monitoring and legislation, of course, but the monitoring as well of the ministerial cabinet, they became part of the ministerial cabinet and also part of the judiciary system. So the ruling political parties were basically represented in the cabinet and in the judiciary system, and there was no separation of power anymore, and they found a name for it. So what they call, for the longest time, they were saying that we don't rule by democracy because we are so many sects in the country. We rule by consensus democracy, which is a word that does have no meaning because it just democracy is basically by voting and by having all of these powers separated. Consensus democracy, meaning that they have to agree on everything they're doing. And the way they agreed on it is that they had a veto power. So all these political parties, they would be like a third. They were like 4 or 5 political parties, and each one of them had a veto power, meaning if they don't agree on a project together, they can veto it and not allow it to move forward, so that any project that has to go forward, all of them have to agree on it, and all of them have to divide their profit shares in it and the shares also of their contractors. So this mini parliament here, they have the ministers that they have the veto power, but they also have their own contractors for any project that goes forward. And those contractors have connections with the public servants that are actually going to do the paperwork in order for the project to go forward. So meaning that those political parties have engraved and entrenched their power into the institutions, the public institutions, and they became the dictators of their parties and of the sect that they represent. So for the longest time, they have created a system within this consensus democracy that if they all agree projects can go towards their contractors and they divide their shares among themselves and among the public servants that they are in the institutions to serve them, and all other entities as well. That means they took over public schools, they divided them among them, the public hospitals, the municipalities, everything. So they became the rulers of the country with dictators over few institutions. And this is how they ruled this country, while Hezbollah was very happy continuing to grow and continuing to buy more arms, to bring more arms from Iran, and to really play this big power game. What happened is with this systemic corruption, it was interesting. When the funding agencies really realized that those people in power are actually benefiting more than they are benefiting the people, they said, okay, you know what? We know that you are dividing those funding that is coming to the country among you. That's why we don't want to fund you anymore as ministries. We want to fund the public directly. And they said, of course, be our guest. But we knew, they did not know that those political parties who agreed to work together, although in the public they fight each other, they have confiscated all the institutions in the country. And so even if the international funding agencies, they come and say, we want to help the municipalities directly, they actually were serving the clientelism of these political parties because they have entrenched all their grip on everything that is present in the country. And so for the longest time, from 2006 all the way to 2024, they really, strengthen what we call, or what we would like to call, me and my colleagues that I presented at the beginning, the systemic corruption with no accountability whatsoever. So this model, we would like to describe it as such. It's a cycle. It's definitely a trap. It starts with the vetocracy, where there is no separation of power at all, and then we have. With vetocracy, then we have the scarcity. That means people are always in need to go back to their political leader, the dictator, in order for them to get a job or to get anything done in the institutions. They are together, they monopolize everything because they are dividing the shares among them. Of course, this promotes clientelism to the best, because everybody needs them in order for them to go to school or to go to the hospital or to do anything in the country. And this would give them eventually more power. And this is how they stayed in power for 30 years. So this cycle has been really perpetual, staying there for forever. And it seemed like there was no exit inside until the election of 2022. Maybe before that, I wanna stop here and say that in 2013, people tried to go down on the streets and stop this perpetual renewal of power from the angle of waste management. And then they were able to break through, but then they stopped them. Again, in 2015, people went down on the streets and tried again through waste management to tell them that we have enough from you. You never solve anything in the country. You always continue to create more problems. And they were able to shut them off. In 2019, millions of people went down on the streets, and they were able to really ask the prime minister to resign. But then again, Hezbollah, with all its weaponry and power, came and really shot some people down, and they were able to burn the tents and really disperse the people who were going peacefully on the street, demanding the regime to step down, until the election of 2022, where all this accumulated change was able to get into the parliament, 12 of us, 12 of change MPs. And this is where things from inside started to shake, until we can talk about what happened after 2024. So between 2022 and 2024, we were able to shake the ground a little bit from inside. But then the war that happened in 2024 between Hezbollah and Israel and the backed up by the United States, is basically what crippled Hezbollah down to its knees. And this is where things started to move in the right direction. We will talk about this. But I wanted to talk about some case studies of the model that I just showed, this model of perpetual renewal of power. So, for example, the money that has been spent on wastewater treatment plants is over $1 billion. It's actually 1.16, as per the books. There might be other money that came in that is not recorded, but in all cases, 1.1 billion US dollars for a country that is so small, of 6 million people, did not lead to any of the water being clean. Basically, over 90% of the water is still contaminated, and nothing, there is nothing to show for. Do we have a law? Yes, we have a law. This law was also issued and drafted by the support of the EU Commission. It cost a lot of money to really come up with this law. This law is very good, the 192 over 2020. However, they managed to not implement the law and continue embezzling the money, pocketing the money, while building either empty plants or plants that have outside structure without really any machinery inside, or they build the whole machine, but then they don't run it with excuses of not having enough flow or not having money to really run it with the proper fuel. So the legal component is there. The governance was complete failure because there was no accountability, and they became so skilled in really putting the blame on other on other structures. So you go to, for example, the water establishment, and you ask them, why are these wastewater treatment plants not working? So they actually are very, very skilled in putting the blame on other offices, other institutions, in order for them to really make everything ambiguous. And one thing that they do while they they make sure that the system does not work, they create a parallel system. So in order for people to get clean water, there is a parallel system that is outside the law that was created of water trucking. So if you want clean water to your home, sometimes you ask some trucks to get you loads of water and you pay for it. So you pay two bills. You pay one bill for the government to get water, and then you pay a second bill in order for the residents to get clean water. The same thing with the energy sector. We have been relying on diesel generators within the neighborhood in order for us to get electricity. And it's the same failure, the same system, the same design of the systemic corruption. They create a parallel economy of diesel generator while they make sure that the national electricity is not is not working. And then also they make this ambiguous accountability, and they make sure that no one is accountable, so that they continue taking money or asking for money in order for them to fix the Electricité du Liban, the national electrical power plant, while they strive with the mini powers within the neighborhood. So the amount of money that has been spent on the electricity sector in Lebanon amounts to $40 billion. Same thing with waste management. So all I'm trying to say here is that this model that we have created after studying so many sectors, came to say that this corruption that we have endured for 30 years has been built with corruption, with like a system in mind that can survive for 30 years and can really feed into this perpetual renewal of power. Okay, so they did this with all the services that government need to provide for its residents, and the residents now pay 2 bills for electricity, 2 bills for water, and huge bills for their health and for all other services. Okay, enough of bad news. In 2024, after 2 years of defaulting on electing a president, because Hezbollah again was using its power to enforce the election of a president that is loyal to its presence and its perpetual or continuation of its armed forces. So there was enough change and peace and ideas of change. There was a big block of parliamentarians who were able to stand against Hezbollah and its allies and not allow the friend of Hezbollah to become the president of Lebanon and take power. So basically, this push and pull lasted for 2 years until the Israeli war happened and Hezbollah was completely broken. And this is where we were able to elect General Joseph Aoun, the head of the Lebanese army forces, who is now the president of Lebanon. And we do have high hopes that this person, who was able to really safeguard the Lebanese army forces from being completely influenced by this corruption or completely not being attacked by Hezbollah, is now taking over the ruling of the country. At the same time, we have Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, who was, before he took this role, the head of the International International Court, the ICC. And so we hope with those two people, one president and one prime minister, who both understand the meaning of accountability and the independent judiciary system, to really bring more order to the country and to hold all these corrupt people accountable. This is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a lot of time to reverse everything. These people who oligarchs or conventional political leaders, who actually were warlords, and then they decided to really say, forget everything that happened in the civil war. Let's start a new country with us being the leaders of this country. So after the civil war, those warlords took over the country in a suit and assumed administrative roles and really basically drove the country into a complete disaster. We hope that now this bleeding of the country and complete corruption and disaster has stopped, and we rally around those two people to really basically rebuild the country in a more accountable way we definitely emphasize on the role of accountability here in order for us to move forward. So we hope that democratic institutions will regain their place, and we don't want to hear about consensus democracy anymore. And with that, I stop, and I want to thank you so much for really listening to my talk, and I'm happy to take questions.
Wow. That was a fascinating and informative presentation, Najat. Thank you. So, thank you also for being willing to take questions. Uh, for those of you that are interested in asking questions, please express your interest in the chat box or write your question in the chat box. That's even better. I'm uninterested in any presentations by audience participants at this point. Please ask questions. Steve Brown asks, to what extent will Hezbollah be able to rebuild? To what extent is Iran still supporting them?
Hezbollah and its allies have agreed to not only agreed, have signed the ceasefire agreement and have committed to implement the UN Resolution 1701 that states explicitly that Hezbollah has to turn in all its weaponry to the government, and they are not allowed to be armed anymore. They could be a political party like anyone else, but they cannot be armed. This is not something to be taken in a grain of salt, like we say, because they will resist this. It seems to us, at the beginning, we were thinking that Hezbollah will be able to get away with a lot of things, but apparently, since the ceasefires up until now, we can see that the international pressure on the president and on the prime minister, as well as the cabinet, is very high to actually force Hezbollah to turn in its weaponry. And at the same time, there is a huge control over the borders and the airport, and there is a pressure on Iran not to send any money to support Hezbollah financially. This does not mean that they are fully cooperative and they will go away tomorrow. This is something that we will have to continue pushing against rearming of Hezbollah and to the complete implementation of the 1701 as it has been agreed by the different parties.
I understand that a number of flights from Tehran destined for Hezbollah hands in Beirut containing large quantities of money in an effort to begin to gather the community together again, the Hezbollah supportive community, that some of those flights have been blocked. I'm going to move on to additional questions here. Lawrence asks, please expand on the impact of the recent Israeli offensive in the hope to break the old cycle and return to real democracy. And I presume that he's talking about the assault on Hezbollah.
They're two separate things. I mean, I think the Israeli offensive has actually put put an end to the arming of Hezbollah, or it has crippled Hezbollah completely. But the return to real democracy is an internal matter that is in the hand of the president and the prime minister. And these two should not be related. They will never be related. I think they are completely separate. We have to always bear in mind that, this has cost us a lot. Yani the arming of Hezbollah and the creation of a new a state within a state has cost Lebanon a lot. And that's why we as Lebanese are rallying behind the president and the prime minister in order for us to break those old cycles. We believe that there is a great need to break those old cycles. And like I said, the change movement is also behind the prime minister and the president to do that. So they're not related, and they shouldn't be related at all. Those are internal matters, and we do really stand in order for us to really break those cycles.
Thank you. I want to follow up on that question. What is the current state of relations between Israeli political officials, but also really in particular the IDF and the Lebanese army?
That's the IDF and Lebanese army are part of a quintet committee that are trying to overlook or make sure that the ceasefire agreement is implemented. And so this is the role where the time when the two are in communication with each other in order for them to make sure that the ceasefire agreement is implemented. But at the same time, we see that the IDF are violating the ceasefire several times, especially in southern Lebanon.
Thank you. Mike asks a big question about the influence of Syria on Lebanon. For more than a generation, Syria had an enormous influence in Lebanon. With the fall of the Assad regime in December and the emergence of the al-Shara regime in Damascus, uh, what's the current state of affairs? How are things going between Lebanon and Syria now in this period?
There are two important issues here. The first is the control of the borders. So, like I said, for the longest time, the borders were completely open between the Assad regime and Hezbollah. So what we need a complete control of the borders from the two sides, and this will ensure the sovereignty and the security of the two countries. And at the same time, what we want from the Syrian regime is to form like a relation from one country to another country. And the Ahmad al-Shara presence there is basically going to create this, where now for the first time, Syria and Lebanon are going to be two separate countries, and the relation between them, it's going to be inter-countries like any other country relationship. And this needs to be rebuilt. But I think preliminary talks have been undergoing in order for the two countries to really stop any illicit trade uh, on uh, on the borders. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask a question at this point on relations with Iran. Uh, Iran has had the primary regime. I mean, the country is ruled by Khamenei, and there is a civilian administration, but there's also the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which has access to immense quantities of funding, has the rights to export over 600,000 barrels of oil a day for its own account. How is Lebanon? I mean, how do you see that going forward? Dealing with two powers, or is there really one Iran to deal with?
At this moment, I think what we need to do is create, like I say, from a sovereign country with another sovereign country, a relationship based on the national interest of each country. We don't want anymore Iran to be interfering with our business. And this is very, very important. And I think we need the international community's support in order for us to build this respect between the two countries. Whether they are making money or not, this is not our business. They make money, let them keep it in their country. This is not something that we want them to be transporting over to Lebanon. And I think this proxy business in Lebanon is going to stop thanks to our president and the prime minister.
Oh, thank
I
you. And
think,
go ahead.
but I wanna emphasize on something that we paid so much from people's people's buildings, homes. The destruction and the price that we have paid is so huge. I don't think any one of us wants to go back to the status that we were in before 2024. And we
Thank you.
have an opportunity and we need to seize it now. Sorry.
Thank you. This leads me to Michael Garcia's question, and I'm going to paraphrase a bit here. You look into your crystal ball and your own experience in Lebanon and your extensive social and political and family connections. How is what's the mood of the concerning the new regime in Beirut? Uh, how hopeful are people? Could you talk a little bit about that?
I think from the first day the president was elected, you can see people greeting each other, people like feeling relieved a little bit. That first of all, we have elected a president that looks like us and that have the same goals as most of the Lebanese people, and that is building a state, building a country. At the same time, this hope amplified by the bringing of the prime minister. And I have to emphasize that the revolution or the change movement had a lot to do with also influencing the choice of the prime minister. And a great number of the ministers themselves, for the first time, are chosen based on their qualifications and based on their CV, or their achievements. And like a lot of us are highly qualified, and most of us have traveled all around the world to acquire education and expertise and knowledge because of the problems that we had inside the country. Some people were brought from abroad, but some people also were living here and they were involved in community work and in public school work and other involvement as well. Those people are scholars, they are achievers, they are experts in their field, and they are put in the right place. This is the first time this happens.
Hmm.
Before, political parties used to put their people, even though they sometimes or most of the time did not fit the minister that they were in charge of. So for the first time, we're putting the right people in the right place. We understand it is very difficult now to rebuild everything from scratch because, like I said, they did not only ruin the upper administration, they ruined everything all the way down to the bottom of every single institution, public institution. And so those ministers, I don't envy their job. They have a lot of work to do, and God help them in rebuilding and reinstating those institutions.
Hmm. Before I move on to Samara's question, I want to ask about the role and activity and the perspective of the Lebanese diaspora around the world. We have a significant Lebanese community, even here in San Diego, California. What's how is the diaspora community in getting involved? You've begun to touch on that. Could you expand a little further? Where is that diaspora community?
They are even getting more organized. I think in 2022, for the first time, they allowed the diaspora to get involved in the election and to also being allowed to elect, like the people living in Lebanon, their parliamentarians. And so they were very excited to take part of the election. They really were not organized, but they were able to move very quickly and get a minimum of organization in order for them to cast their vote and make a huge influence on the turnout of the election. We have to remember in 2022 that the political parties were still very powerful, and they were putting pressure on the people, local people, to vote towards, for their advantage. And so some people here were um, uh, completely, what do you say? They were completely forced to go in one direction rather than the other, whereas people in the diaspora were free to choose their representatives, and that's why 12 of us were able to make a breakthrough. It was the vote of the diaspora that made all of this change. And since then, they became a lot more organized, and they also formed lobby groups in their respective countries. We have to also, I would like to mention that in Lebanon, we have 6 million people, and outside Lebanon, there are over 12 million people all over the world. And so the diaspora, the Lebanese diaspora, is extremely important in number and in expertise and in impact, be it towards Lebanon and in the countries that they live in.
Thank you. Samara asks, have you seen any other examples of the framework, the perpetual power that you mentioned in other countries currently or historically? And what would you advise people to do anywhere to stop the repetition of such a framework?
That's so interesting. Who was the person? Who was
This
Samara?
is, yes.
Samara, it took us 2 years of work in order for us to understand the system, because we wanted to actually know how to move to stop this cycle. It was not easy, so we had to study those sectors of water treatment, of banking, of no matter where the service lies, the system was able to operate in the same manner in order for them to continue their grip on it. And so this is not easy. We are still in understanding the local dynamics, but it will be very, very interesting. And I think this is the next step we want to take, is basically understand whether this system has been also operating in other places. I don't have a clear answer, but it's definitely on our mind to see if it is replicated or probably abducted from somewhere else. I don't know, Rashad, do you have anything to add in here? I see you laughing.
Well, I like the fact that we're getting some really good questions and we're getting some very informative answers here. Yeah, thank you. Yuri Miller asks a question about Hezbollah and Palestinian influence. And of course, as I understand it, there are still Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. And he asks if Hezbollah and Palestinian influence in Lebanese politics is gone. How do you see Lebanon's relations with Israel? So,
I believe that this is a premature question, because Israel is still occupying part of the Lebanese territory. So we would like to see the sovereignty and the security of the country regained back. We would like also to focus on our economy, and then this will be later discussed within the framework of the Arab League.
Interesting. Actually, this before I get to Tanya's question, you mentioned the Arab League. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, very much so, are active in the region and are trying to support, it seems, the new al-Shabaab regime in Syria. What is their role in Lebanon now? What are their interests?
Look, Saudi Arabia is an extremely important ally, and for the longest time, they have supported Lebanon ever since Lebanon probably existed. But then, during the time where Hezbollah was gaining power, Saudi Arabia decided to completely turn their back on us, and we felt completely isolated. We are happy now that with the new president, Saudi Arabia is opening its ties with Lebanon again, and we are extremely happy to see this, especially that a lot of investment from the Saudis can come to Lebanon because historically they really were investing in Lebanon, and they like to spend the summer in Lebanon. A lot of tourists from Saudi Arabia used to come to Lebanon to spend the summer in Lebanon. So we have a lot of important ties with Saudi Arabia that we don't want to lose. In the contrary, we want to strengthen in order for us to continue a healthy relationship, not like the one that we experienced in the past 18 years when Hezbollah was actually taken over.
Okay. I want to ask a question that sort of follows up on that, on the economics. For the entire history of modern Lebanon, Beirut has been essentially the commercial and even financial capital of the region, the Levant. And much of Syria's economy uh, moved through Beirut, both in terms of trade and finance. How important is the recovery of Syria to the future of Lebanon?
Like you said, David, that's a very important question because we have a lot of commercial or business exchange between the two countries. And Syria is much, much bigger than Lebanon. So we act like the gate to a lot of trade between Europe and Syria, and between the rest of the world and Syria as well. So our business is intertwined, and that's why stability in Syria would bring a lot of businesses to Lebanon and vice versa. I think this is extremely important that both these countries are stable and they start, both of them, building on the right path.
Thank you. Tanya asks a question that actually was in my back pocket. The United States has been building a new embassy in Beirut, a huge embassy. What is the status? What is the purpose of this huge facility?
I want to ask you. Like you're saying, Tanya, nobody knows why they're building such a huge embassy. It's good to have the U.S. being interested in Lebanon here. It doesn't hurt. I think it helps. So I'm not sure if I want to elaborate more on this. Rashad, do you want to say something here? No.
I just want to say that, it's no secret that they're building the biggest embassy in the area here. And just like Najat said, It does us no harm.
Well, I would wager to say that not many people on this call knew it, but they know it now. I'm going to move on to the next question from Colleen. Can you explain more about how the banking crisis in Lebanon developed in recent years? What is your view on the possibility of average citizens getting their savings back?
Well, thank you, Colleen, for this. This is a big, big battle that we have to win, and it has to start with accountability. I think the United States experienced something of the same sort in 2008, right? Where the banking system started to collapse, but then the federal government came to its rescue. Here, they did this, but at the same time, the federal government tried not to rescue it, but to steal even more. So this is a major, for us, theft of the Lebanese money in the way they handled all the debts. And okay, so what I'm trying to say is that they promised the Lebanese people to keep the dollar, to peg the dollar against the Lebanese lira and to keep it stable at 1,500s, while they were spending lots of money on their clienteles and on their own projects. They actually stole people's money to strengthen their clientelism and to actually become more and more rich. That's why accountability for us is extremely important. We want the judiciary system to investigate the theft of the century. The gap that they are talking about is $70 billion. And ridiculously enough, they say that this is a gap. They don't want to call it a theft, they want to call it a gap. And so while those political leaders are still in power, they're not allowing the judiciary system to go forward in investigating the theft, but we will keep pushing in order for them to return the money to the people and to hold people who stole the money accountable.
Thank you. Uh, If you are in the audience and you have a question to ask, we still have a few more minutes available. Please feel free to write your question in the chat box. Well, Samara asks another heavy question. It's another proxy question.
Oh, Samara, thank you for this question. For the longest time, you're right. Historically, Lebanon has been has had guardians from Syria and then to Iran, and then probably before that, France and all others. Right now, we understand that we have certain influence from the US government. We do hope that this time people are more ready to build strong administrations so that Lebanon does not need to have any proxy country in the future. We have an opportunity this time, and I think we talked about too many factors that could strengthen this opportunity, including the diaspora and the interest of the diaspora in really building a country that looks like the people who are expert and people who have experienced the sovereignty and the security of other countries, and they want to replicate what they saw and where they lived inside Lebanon. So that's why I keep saying we have an opportunity here. We need to seize this opportunity, and we need to be ready to support the current administration in order for us to build this government.
Thank you. Mike has a question here. Do you see Turkey playing a positive role in helping Lebanon recover and establish a new stable nation? And I have a follow-up on this.
Why? Why would Turkey want that? um, Turkey definitely has certain influence and interest in the region. Nobody is going to help us recover except us. We want to. The building of a stable nation in Lebanon is solely the responsibility of the Lebanese people. Would Turkey like to have an influence inside Lebanon? Yes, if we allow it. So again, I'm probably repeating myself, but definitely right now we need to work on a stable nation by the Lebanese people and protect all these interferences. Because if Turkey wants a part of to be or take part of Lebanese politics, it will not be for the sake of the Lebanese, but it will be for the sake of Turkey.
So my follow-up question has to do with the potential for offshore natural gas in the eastern Mediterranean waters of Lebanon. Israel, Egypt, and Cyprus have made large, even world-class discoveries of deep water natural gas, and there is considerable prospect for these resources to be found in offshore waters of Lebanon. I know that there was quite a scramble a few years ago over signing bonuses and all, and I'm curious what the status of that is and how will that impact Lebanese political institutions going forward?
Well, there was, like you said, some trials to see if they can extract oil. The two wells that they dug did not show potential of gas in the place where they looked. But we were talking with some expert, and they said it's normal. It's not usually the rate is not 100%. You don't dig the first well and you get the gas. So it's gonna be like several trials before they know where the rock that holds the big reservoir is. There is a an intention to start again looking for another well in another place. Definitely the oil and the gas is there based on the experts' um, opinions and advice. And once the oil is extracted, this is going to help Lebanon a lot get out of its debt. And it's going to also help the upper administration, I mean the president and the prime minister, to actually negotiate good deals and promote the economic growth in the country. This is going to help a lot. But before we get to that, I think what we need to do is clean up the administration and get like due process, transparent due processes in place. And probably it is for the benefit of the country and its own people that we haven't found oil yet. We do hope that we do the reforms before we get to the oil.
So that leads me to my final question, and we'll close on this question. Thank you. So as Lebanon looks forward from this moment of political opportunity, real opportunity, what aspects of the Lebanese economy do you see reviving first? And how will that, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of positively impacting the most people possible. What's going to be the easiest and what will be the most beneficial coming out of this challenging period of war and turbulence?
I think the easiest and the fastest that could kick off is tourism, because we have 13 million people outside Lebanon, and all of them want to come and visit Lebanon if Lebanon is stable and safe. And so as soon as people feel like they can come back, you can see that there is a flood of Lebanese people coming back. And so tourism is easy and it's quick and it can really kick off the economy very, very much. There are certain industries that can be also done. There is the culinary industry that is really good, and it has shown that it is able to survive despite all the hurdles and obstacles that they have seen in during the economic collapse, and then after that there was the Beirut blast and then the Israeli war. And with all these big challenges, they survived, they stayed, and some of them, they even opened franchises in the neighboring countries, including the Gulf countries. So the culinary business is very, very strong. And I think it can also, with some stability, it can grow very fast in here and also in the Gulf and the Arabic countries around us. So I'm thinking about the easy ones first. Right, and those are easy. Some industries also are good, and Lebanon is so small, and people are really resilient, and I don't think it takes too much time for Lebanese to find their way back in.
Well, certainly we're hoping for the best. I will speak for myself. I'm hoping for the best. Najat, thank you for an amazing presentation. It's very informative. For the audience members, this presentation has been recorded and will be posted on the San Diego World Affairs Council YouTube page. We will distribute a link to that posting to all the registrants of this presentation today. And I really want to thank you, Najat Aoun Saliba, for taking time to present to us. It's getting late in the evening in Beirut. But again, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so
God
much
bless.
for this opportunity. I'm honored. Thank you.
Good day, everybody. See you soon.